I'm the daughter of a single mom who's a hero of mine for all the sacrifices that she had to make. As I was growing up, my mom had chronic health issues and didn't have health insurance. For my family and working families across San Antonio, we know what a lack of access to healthcare looks like. What we have now in Texas since the Dobbs decision is a law that criminalizes basic reproductive health care and is disrespectful to the women of Texas who are smart enough, strong enough, and capable enough to make decisions about their futures. Let me tell you about myself. I'm 33 years old, and I want to speak personally as a young woman living under the most extreme abortion ban in the country. I grew up low income on the south side of San Antonio. We didn't have stable housing. We moved around a lot, bounced around house to house, sometimes relying on my grandma or one of my tias for support. Each day I spent at an after-school program at my elementary school while my mom was at work. Despite being low income and not always having stable housing, I grew up with the support of my family and I grew up with the support of my community. A lot of young women across Texas, myself included, are facing the reality that not only have we lost the ability to choose when and how many children we want to have, we're living under a government stripping our communities of the programs that allowed us to grow up safe and healthy. Women are being forced to have children, and once we have those children, we face raising them without after-school programs, without affordable housing, and without doctors who can focus on our health care instead of fear of persecution. For me and for a lot of young women who have the desire to start a family, we're scared to do so because we don't have the same community support that our families had when we were growing up. Greg Abbott is stripping us of the resources and support that are essential to raising a family. And he's also taken our choice to decide when we want to raise a family. My message to Greg Abbott is this: we need community support, not government intervention. People like to say that working people don't care about the abortion issue, or Latinos aren't talking about abortion. I knock doors every single day on the south side of San Antonio, and let me tell you, they do and they are. I'm knocking on doors. I'm talking to folks after church. I'm talking to people around their kitchen tables, and people are fed up. It's time the state of Texas restores access to abortion care and make sure that we're fully funding the programs that communities and working families like mine will always need. Thank you. Next, I would like to introduce Taylor Edwards, who is a plaintiff in the Zarowski case.
Thank you so much. My name is Taylor Edwards, and I'm one of over 20 women who brought their story before the Texas Supreme Court in the Zarowski case after being denied medically necessary abortion care and having to flee the state. They refused to hear me, so I thank you all for listening and being here today. That decision, much like the one overturning Roe v. Wade, has left me and my fellow plaintiffs feeling at a loss of how some of our leaders across the state could hear our stories and our real lived experiences and decide that they were okay with what's happening to women in Texas. If Roe v. Wade had never been overturned, Senator Ted Cruz had never pushed his extreme policies on abortion, the worst day of my life could have been averted. Instead, it was made all the much more difficult. After years of IVF treatment, I finally conceived my daughter in November of 2022. After multiple scans and monitoring by our doctors, we went into our anatomy scan confident that everything would be okay. Instead, we were told she had a fatal diagnosis and would never survive. Instead of being offered health care right then and there by my doctors that I know and trusted, I was forced to leave the state with no information and scour the internet to try to understand what was happening. Returning to Texas after my abortion, I was terrified that I would be prosecuted by the state or my husband would be prosecuted. And you shouldn't have to live in fear when you're going through something so traumatic. The most heartbreaking medical decisions mothers can face should be between themselves, their doctors, and their families, without room for politicians to weigh in. Women deserve the freedom to access the health care they need and to get it close to home with the doctors and medical team they trust. Instead, we have been criminalized by extreme politicians like Ted Cruz. I am not a criminal. I am a mother who made the best decision she could out of love for her baby who was terminally ill. What's more is I wanted this baby so desperately and needed IVF to conceive. And I was able to give birth to my son last month because of IVF. And now IVF is under threat too by Republicans. By now we all know that who he is and what he's done. He's openly bragged about working to take away our reproductive freedoms, and women cannot afford 6 more years of him making these decisions for us. Ted Cruz is proud of what is happening in this state. That's why I'm thrilled to support Congressman Colin Allred and be here today to share my story, because he listens to us and he will fight for us. And I know that he will fight to restore women's safety, our peace of mind, and our freedoms across the state. Turn it over to Liz.
Hello, everyone. I'm proud to be standing here with this group of people today. Medical professionals, human beings who have, of course, suffered the consequences of what's happened with the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Political leaders who are fighting to make sure that we restore the voices of people who are impacted by decisions like the Dobbs decision across our state. And I'm especially proud to be standing here next to my friend Colin Allred, who is running to be a voice for those of us who need one in so many aspects, but very particularly in this aspect. As many of you know, reproductive rights has been an important fight and journey for me throughout my political career. And we understand better than anyone does here in Texas what the impact of losing our reproductive rights and freedoms are. We understand intimately that abortion care is health care, and we understand intimately what the human consequences, those that Amanda and others have suffered by virtue of these laws. Ted Cruz celebrated the Dobbs decision, even though here in our state, we had already endured a year of having had our rights to safe legal abortion stripped from us. We already were enduring the consequences of that, and the stories had were coming forward in ways that were incredibly traumatizing and moving. And yet, on the day of the Dobbs decision, Ted Cruz was celebrating. He called it a major victory, and the law that Texas then passed, its near total abortion ban, reasonable. Reasonable. The Amanda Zarowski case and all of the plaintiffs that have been a part of that highlighted for all of us that this law is nowhere close to reasonable. There are no exceptions for rape and incest, no matter how old you are. There are no exceptions for fatal fetal anomaly. And even though there purports to be an exception for life of the mother, it's not worth the paper that it's written on. And we've heard that story over and over again. And it's not going to stop here in Texas, and it's only going to get worse elsewhere if we don't elect leaders like Colin Allred, like Christian Carranza, who's here today running for the State House. They are the ones who are going to restore our rights to us, these inherent basic freedoms to make healthcare decisions for ourselves and our families without Ted Cruz standing in the doctor's office with us making those decisions for us. I'm supporting Colin for many reasons, not the least of which that he is a father who understands the importance of this health care, who understands that we can't have full autonomy over our lives as women and others who can become pregnant if we don't have the ability to make decisions about when and whether we're going to have children. That's why he supports making sure that we have broad access to contraceptive care, that we are able to get that care over the counter if we need it. That's why Colin believes that we need to restore Roe versus Wade. And we need to do it at the federal level so that every state across this country is one where women can be truly free. He believes, of course, that we should hold IVF as sacred, and continue to make sure that every family that wants to have a child can have one. And Ted Cruz is on the opposite side on every one of these issues. And he is going to continue to sell the lives of Texas women down the river for as long as he is in office. We cannot afford the extremism of Ted Cruz any longer. And we can't afford the luxury of saying that we are going to sit this election out. Because unless and until we elect leaders like Colin Allred, we are not going to solve this problem. The only way forward is to elect our way forward. I'm very happy now to introduce Colin's wife, Allred.
Well, it's an honor to have Wendy here with us, who is fighting very hard for this issue long before Dobbs. So thank you for coming here today with us. I'm Allred, and I'm Colin's wife. I'm an attorney, a mom of 2 little boys, and like many other women in Texas, I know both the joy and the complete chaos of trying to be a mom, a wife, and a working mother. Something that is now more difficult each time politicians try to attack women's freedoms in Texas. Colin and I had 2 babies in Texas at Baylor Hospital in Dallas, and we were really blessed. We had healthy babies, we had healthy pregnancies, but you still go to every appointment and to every ultrasound, and you hold your breath, and you pray for good news. And if you get that impossible news that Taylor got, and that many other women get every single day, the most difficult news you can imagine, politicians in Texas, like Ted Cruz, have done the unthinkable, which is to make it even harder for women in those unthinkable moments. No longer are these tough decisions that may come made between you, your family, your faith, your doctor. Now there are lawyers involved, administrators, and politicians like Ted Cruz. We had both our boys in Dallas, and I had so many thoughts during my pregnancies and during both of our deliveries. What would we name our children? Do I need a bassinet? What on earth is a nose Frida? And I can tell you some things I wasn't thinking too. I wasn't thinking, I wish a lawyer were here. I'm a lawyer. I don't belong in your doctor's office. And I certainly was not thinking, I really wish Ted Cruz were here with me. Texans respect freedom. And since Dobbs, Texas women have fewer freedoms. Texas women are proud, we are strong women, and we can make our own decisions because we know what's right for our families. We need to elect a senator that knows that and that trusts us. A senator who respects our freedoms, who respects everybody's freedom. A senator who cares about us. And we all know that that is not Ted Cruz. Colin is a 4th-generation Texan, an incredible father to our 2 boys, and a civil rights lawyer. Colin will be a senator who fights for our freedoms. A senator who knows that this abortion ban goes too far. A senator who believes bipartisanship isn't just something you do in an election year, but it's a way that you get things done every day. A senator who will fight for your family as hard as he fights for our family. I know that Colin will be that senator. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my wonderful husband, Congressman Colin Allred.
Well, thank you, sweetheart. And thank you all for being here. Thank you to Austin Women's Health Center for having us. This is a clinic that was once able to provide a full range of care to their patients. And they're now doing what they can to serve women under extreme limitations. I want to really thank all the women who are here today. From Taylor, to my dear friend Wendy, to Christian, who we are going to elect to the State House, and to all the women across our state who have been sharing their stories, their incredibly personal stories, showing bravery that we can all just respect. Women like Dr. Austin Denard, who's a friend of mine. Austin is a 4th-generation Texan, no, she's a 6th-generation Texan. She was my guest at the State of the Union this year. She's an OBGYN who had to flee our state to get the care she needed. Women like Kate Cox in Dallas, a mom who got the news that we all hope we don't get, that her pregnancy wasn't going to make it. Had to go to the emergency room 4 times and asked her state if she could get the care she needed close to home and had to flee our state. Women like Lauren Miller, who lives close to Allie and I in Dallas. Lauren is an 8th generation Texan, and she was pregnant with twins. One of the twins wasn't going to make it. It was killing the other and her, and she had to flee our state. Women like Amanda Zarowski. Amanda's story is as heartbreaking as it comes. Because she couldn't get the care she needed, she may never be able to welcome a child. And all the others who've had to leave our state or who've had to suffer in silence. They all got the news that we all hope that we don't get, that we all pray that we don't get. There's something wrong with the baby. There's nothing that their doctors could do to treat them. Even the basic right of travel is under attack now in our state. I recently spoke with women in Amarillo who are fighting back against a travel ban and winning. There are criminalized women who are using the roads in their city or in their county to access an abortion. In 2023, 35,500 women have had to flee our state to get an abortion. Most of them had to make a long drive or a flight, and the lucky ones were the ones who could travel out of state. 26,000 Texas women have been forced to carry their rapist child to term since Dobbs came down. That's not the Texas that I know. That's not who I know we are. As I said, I'm a 4th generation Texan, born and raised in Dallas by a single mom. My family's from Brownsville. I went to school at Baylor. I think I know who we are. And this isn't it. But it is who Ted Cruz thinks we are. We are here today because of Ted Cruz. Let's be very clear about that. We are here with nearly all abortions being banned in the state of Texas, even those that are medically necessary, without exceptions for rape or incest, with even IVF under threat, because of Ted Cruz and extremists like him. In many ways, he was the architect of the situation that we're in now. He helped to elect anti-abortion state legislators and to appoint federal judges that he knew would threaten Texans' freedoms and rights. He endorsed personhood amendments and championed court cases undermining the freedom to access an abortion. This dangerous ban goes way too far, and it's on him. As I mentioned, I was raised by a single mom. When you grow up that way, not knowing your dad, and you know that you're going to become a father, you take it even more seriously, I think. So with Allie, I went to every single ultrasound appointment, every single genetic test, and she said, you hold your breath in those appointments. You don't know what they're going to say. I can't imagine if while we were there, a doctor had come in and said, there's a problem with the baby. There's nothing I can do. You're going to have to try and find a way to leave the state. I can't imagine how we would have felt. Those rooms are so small. They're so small. They have so much promise in them. Those rooms are too small to have Ted Cruz in there too. There's a different path from the one that we're on now. One where we can restore Texas freedoms, where we can reinstate Roe v. Wade and go back to the standard that we've had for the last 50 years in this country. But to do that, we need a senator who will fight for every Texan, for all of our freedoms. And I pledge to every Texan today that I will be that senator for you. I will restore our freedoms, and I will unite us around our shared values. Values like the freedoms that are the bedrock of who we are as Texans. And I believe that come November 5th, Texans are going to stand up. And they're going to send a message about who we really are. That we can't afford 6 more years of an extremist like Ted Cruz and his attack on our fundamental freedoms. And when we do that, it's going to be a win for democracy. Thank you, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Yeah, we now have a few minutes for questions from the press.
Hi, Erin Davis, Spectrum News. There was a new study that came out that showed after Texas passed its abortion law, the percentage of infant deaths increased by 13%. What does hearing the statistic kind of mean for you and you all's fight in reproductive health care?
I saw that study, and I also saw some of the experts, their comments saying that this is to be expected. That once this law came down, once we had this near total ban of abortion put in place, that this is the end point. And that's what we're experiencing here in Texas. There are brave women here today like Taylor who are telling their stories. But there are so many others who won't get a chance to do that. And we are here to stand up for all of them, to be their voice. I want them to know that I will restore their rights. We will codify Roe v. Wade. What does that mean? That means making Roe v. Wade back into law through legislation. When we do that, we'll restore rights to Texans and to women all across our country. We will override some of these ridiculous laws that have been passed here in our state. And we'll make sure that we go back to the standard that we had for the last 50 years that folks have come to expect and I think understand.
How do you get that through basically an evenly divided Senate when the rule is you need 60 votes to do most anything, even go to lunch, it seems? Where are the other 10 or the other 9 Colin Allreds?
Well, listen, number one, this is going to be bipartisan. We have at least 2 senators who have said that they are pro-choice and they want to restore this right. And I believe that given the option, that we will be able to work together to get that done. I also recognize that we will have to have some reforms to the filibuster. It's important to me that the Senate retains its bipartisan nature, and I will continue to be somebody who stands up for that. But we also cannot let some of these standards stand in the way of restoring individual freedoms.
Ted Cruz has been touting his own IVF legislation that he says would protect IVF treatments. Talk to me about that legislation, and does that really do what he's saying it does?
Well, he also had a chance to join on to Tammy Duckworth's bill, which he did not. And I think it was a cynical attempt to try and, in an election year, cover up positions he's taken in the past. Let's be very clear, when he ran for president in 2016, he endorsed the Personhood Amendment, which would have meant that things like IVF would be illegal. But it's also, I think, Texans see through what Ted Cruz is doing. We are here because of him. This is like the burglar coming to your house and trying to sell you new locks. We are here talking about IVF needing protection because of his attacks on it. IVF did need protecting before Ted Cruz had his way. And so that's why it's so cynical to now in an election year come forward and try and say, oh, I'm for this, when you haven't been your whole career, and you've also been responsible for why it needs protection in the first place.
Hi, Bayless Wagner, Austin American Statesman. Could you talk about, given the, as John mentioned, some of the longer shots, long chances that codifying Roe would happen in the next, say, session, any other women's health-related legislation you've worked on or that you hope to work on?
Yeah. Well, I disagree that it's a long shot, but I also want to commend my colleague Lizzie Fletcher, who has introduced legislation to protect the right to interstate travel. I have to be honest, I never thought that that would be necessary in 2024, that we'd be talking about being to allow women to travel freely in the United States of America. But I was just on the phone this morning with a constituent of mine in Dallas, who's a lawyer, and who just happens to be pregnant. And she told me she's terrified. She's terrified, and she's having conversations with her doctor, talking around the issue about what she may have to do if she gets the news that we all hope we don't get. And so we certainly have to protect that. And the fact that here in Texas we have municipalities and even state legislators, some of my colleagues here know, talking openly about restricting women's travel shows you how far we've gone. But it's also true that we have to protect the right to contraception. And this is something that just, I think last week, Ted Cruz prevented from happening in the United States Senate. I don't know why it's hard to stand up for the right to access contraception. To me, that seems like a pretty easy one. It should be bipartisan, should not be controversial, but apparently it is. And apparently Ted Cruz couldn't support it. So in addition to codifying Roe v. Wade, we have to, I think, go back to protecting some of these fundamental freedoms that are clearly under attack. So.
Congressman, what does it say to you that Democrats across the country are commemorating what happened 2 years ago with events like this, whereas specifically around Texas, if you look at the Republicans elected statewide, Ted Cruz has been tweeting a lot, but not about this issue. I haven't seen Governor Abbott say anything. I think Paxton is the only one who's released a statement. What does that say about where the parties are on abortion?
I think Ted Cruz is probably going to do 3 to 5 podcasts this week. If that holds true, let's see if he discusses this during one of his podcasts. I know that when Texas women have come to his committee in the United States Senate to testify, he has refused to be there to hear them out. Just 2 weeks ago, Laura Miller, who I mentioned, she's an 8th-generation Texan. She came to the United States Senate to tell her story, and he refused to hear her. Amanda Zarowski, when Amanda came to testify, he wasn't there. And he wouldn't hear them those days, but he will on November 5th.
Okay, I think that's all we have time for today. Thanks, everyone. We are going to have some surrogates, including Taylor Edwards, gathering on this side of the room if you want to follow Josh. And thanks again for being here today.
Outside.